Causes of the February Revolution 1917. Short-term causes. Military impact. Defeat at the hands of the Germans at Tannenberg in August and the Masurian Lakes in September 1914 quickly dampened the war morale. The war brought many of the weaknesses of the regime into sharp focus. Inadequacies of planning for military mobilisation were revealed. Rifles were in short supply and the artillery was limited to 2 or 3 shells a day. Casualties mounted, 2 million were dead and a further 5 million were injured. One of the main problems during the war was the lack of distribution rather than insufficient production. In 1916, supplies to the army had been improved. The government ensured that getting food supplies to the soldiers was very important, and this was helped by good harvests. However, food supplies to the cities were less secure. Economic impact. The lack of management and the administrative policy of armaments led to the shortages of supplies to the soldiers and people in the cities. The countryside suffered after conscription was introduced, leaving women and elderly to work on farms. Their job was made even harder when the army took the horses. This led to a large decrease in productivity. Peasants began to hoard grain. Towns and cities suffered as there was a dramatic increase of new workers in Petrograd. There was also food and fuel shortages, which in turn led to inflation causing unrest. In an attempt to help the economy, the government set up Zemgor to try and resolve these problems, but the Zemgor had limited effectiveness as the Tsar was afraid to give them any real power. This also caused frustration because of their limited role. Social impact. The peasantry lost their young, able and well-trained farmers to conscription, which made the remaining peasants having to do their job, which led to a decrease in productivity. The middle classes were frustrated at the lack of their involvement with the war effort. They were also frustrated with the lack of their food distribution, which led to unrest in cities and towns. The landowners, who were mainly upper class, of large estates were hit by a collapse in value of land and severe shortages of farm labourers. Political impact. Actions of the Tsar. The Tsar closed down the Duma for good in 1915. This led to the middle classes to become more frustrated as their chance in helping with the war effort was even more limited. This closure also led to a collapse in public confidence. However, ex-Duma members did form the Progressive Bloc in 1915 to try and appeal to the Tsar on how they wanted included in running the war. The Unions of Towns and the Union of Zemstvos began in helping to organise military supplies, but with the Tsar's unwillingness to work with the Zemgors, led to the limited effect on dealing with the problems caused by the war. The Tsar became Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. This meant that he could receive sole blame for all military defeats. This also isolated himself from the events in Petrograd, and a lot of confidence in the Tsar was lost from this decision. The Tsar also had to put his wife Alexandra, the Tsarina, in charge of the country. The Tsarina was suspected of being a spy due to her German background. She also appointed Sturmer as Prime Minister in 1916, who was unpopular and generally regarded as a pro-German minister. This brought a great decrease in the Russian people's confidence. There is also rumours of the Tsarina having an affair with the mad monk Rasputin. Rasputin influenced the Tsarina greatly and changed 3 ministers of war, 4 ministers of agriculture, and 5 ministers of the interior in 1916 alone. This led to Rasputin's murder in December 1916. He was killed by Prince Yusupov. The growth in literacy from the education policy also made it easier to spread around more rumours, which would corrode the Tsar's regime. The war had served to reveal the anachronistic nature of the regime. Events of February 1917. The revolution took place on the 23rd of February. It was made up from the strike at the Putilov Steelworks and the International Women's Day March, who were having a march on the streets about the problem of food and fuel prices. The military broke down and refused to deliver the Tsar's orders, which were to fire on the crowd, and instead started to mingle with the demonstrators. After the army refused to fire on the demonstrators, army generals advised Nicholas to abdicate, which he did in the 3rd of March 1917. This led to the end of the Romanov dynasty. The Petrograd Soviet formed the 27th February, which was elected into power by the people. By the end of 1917, thousands of Soviets were spread throughout Russia. Long-term causes. The Tsar's regime was resistant to change due to Nicholas' fear of losing any power. He was inexperienced, easily influenced, arrogant and distant from the Russian people. The size of the Russian Empire led to poor transport systems and poor communication systems. Due to its size, there was a lot of national minorities around Russia who demanded greater independence. The government responded with Russification, which angered the minorities. There was problems with the economy, as the peasantry used backwards farming methods which resulted in low productivity. The urban working classes had poor living and working conditions. There was political frustration. The Liberals, who were opposed to the violence, was split into two: the Octoberists, who were content with the October Manifesto, and the Cadets, who saw the October Manifesto as the first step to further reform. The revolutionaries believed that overthrowing Tsarism was the only option. The social revolutionaries believed in a peasant-led revolution and setting up of a commune system. The Social Democrats were split into two. The Mensheviks believed in a Marxist revolution at some time in the future, but in the meantime believed in working with other groups to help solve the poor conditions of the working class. The Bolsheviks believed in a Marxist revolution as soon as possible and without cooperation with other groups.